early on in the kind of Cobry journey, from when it started to now, we've noticed that Google Apps Script is a superpower and allowed us to glue services together for the organizations that we service.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Google Workspace Developer Spotlight. This time in the Spotlight, we've got Cobry from Scotland, United Kingdom, and joining us today are Wiktor and Lewis Conroy. Hey gentlemen, how you doing?
Very well. How are you, Charles?
Great. So real quick, guys, let us know a little bit about Cobry and what it is each of you do.
Cobry is a Google Cloud partner. We cover Google Workspace and also data and analytics on GCP. I'm the development lead, so I kind of oversee all the architectural, programming, and development things that go on both internally at Cobry and also for our clients. Sitting kind of virtually alongside me, below, left, right, we've got Lewis. He's one of our cloud architects, and the reason we've brought him on today is because he's an expert in Google Chat apps.
Let's jump right into it about Cobry. I think it's pretty awesome. I love some of the work you're doing, which is why we asked you to join us in the spotlight. One of the things I really love is your tagline, bringing the cloud down to earth. I think that's awesome. What is your philosophy around Google Workspace and building projects with it? And what are some of the projects that you do for customers?
So, bringing the cloud down to earth is a tagline that we took on back when Cobry started, back in the day. I think it was 2013. And that was purely because IT departments and IT centers were usually seen as a cost center within a business. Usually, organizations used fluffy language to sell their products and things like that. But what Google Workspace allowed us to do as Cobry is really bring it down to earth and make it really easy to explain to IT organizations within organizations and businesses. The IT doesn't have to be complex and complicated. It can be simple, it can be usable, it can be secure, and kind of bringing that cloud down to earth. And what that allowed us to do is allowed us to go into businesses and talk about the cloud in a one-on-one perspective with business leaders and organizations and make it really simple to understand and digest. In terms of Google Apps Script and Google Workspace, the one thing that Google Apps Script done for us as a business has helped us glue these services together that Google Workspace provides. So Google Workspace is amazing in terms of the products and services that it offers, but sometimes organizations just need something custom, something that maybe isn't offered by default in the package. So early on in the kind of Cobry journey, from when it started to now, we've noticed that Google Apps Script is a superpower and allowed us to glue services together for the organizations that we service. So if there's maybe something that is a little custom or a little tweak that needs to be made to an application, or maybe we want to connect an application that's from a third party into Google Workspace, we can do all of that using Google Apps Script. And hence the kind of development part of Cobry was born. It all started with Google Apps Script and an idea in saying that, hey, we can actually solve this problem with a client, not by going out and buying a new tool or not bringing in a huge development team and racking up bills on different other cloud services, but actually we can link things together using Google Apps Script fast and easily as well.
You just mentioned these custom solutions for your customers that you would build. Is there any specific project or solution that comes to mind, like, I don't know, the coolest or the most challenging, or I don't know, maybe in the weirdest?
So in terms of solutions and projects that we've done with our customers, this one's kind of boring, but it comes up all the time. So there's a lot of times where organizations, for example, need a way to update data in a third-party system. And what they usually do is they bring in a custom CRM solution or a custom ERP. The most amazing thing about AppScript, and kind of the projects that I get most passionate about, is actually building full services such as a custom CRM on top of pure Google Workspace, without any external services, without any third-party applications. Is just pure Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides with a bit of AppScript, a bit of Gmail, and you can actually build a full CRM system just using those 4 tools. Of course, bringing in other Google Workspace services along the way. So although saying we've built custom CRMs and things like that, maybe a more of a boring answer, it's one that's really, really useful for us to demonstrate, because it really demonstrates the power of Workspace as a platform. And I really, really love that, Workspace as a platform, because it gives organizations the idea that once we have Workspace, all that is a foundation to actually building something that's a lot more complex and more robust. So although it might not be the flashy answer that you might have asked for, I think it's the one that kind of opens up the most doors in terms of organizations' minds as to what is actually possible.
I
No,
think it's a great question because it proves that for a lot of customers who use Google Workspace, it kind of like makes other tools unnecessary. So you can save money by just using Google Workspace and having a partner like Cobry build your custom solutions based upon that. So I love the answer.
yeah, that was a great answer. I love the workspace as a platform thesis. Something we've been saying. It's glad to hear somebody else say it back at us and actually mean it. So that's
We've been
super
saying
neat.
that for a while now. Workspace is a platform. I think we've got receipts of us saying that back in 2014. So I'd love to say that we were the first, and I'd love to be proven otherwise.
So one of the things that caught our collective eye is that Cobry has created a chat app, and your chat app is called Updateli for Workspace. What was the impetus behind that? And can you give us the story behind what it does and little insights there?
The reason that we wanted Updateli was actually because Cobry was growing. So when Cobry started, it was only several people, and communication between several people is actually quite easy. You can get together in a group and a room and get excited about some of the things that you're working on. And one of the key things within Cobry is knowing all about Google Workspace. So Google Workspace updates are pivotal pieces of information that help us run our business. Now, what happens when you bring more and more and more people on? Well, what happens is that little web of connections and communications, it starts to kind of fall apart. It's much easier to communicate within a group of 7 than it is to communicate within a group of 20, 30, 40. So we had to think of a better way of us communicating together around Google Workspace updates. So Google Chat, a lovely product made by Google again, allowed us to bring in these Google Workspace updates and create threads to discuss and talk about all these workspace updates, and maybe tag in clients that think that update might be useful for them, and things like that. Now, that was a bit of a manual process. Someone actually went on the Google Workspace updates blog and they copied and pasted the update in, and then that notified everyone. And that was good, but that took up time. And what happens when things take up time? We try to automate them. So I rounded up the dev team and I said, hey, how can we make this easier for everyone within Cobry? And very quickly we said AppScript is our solution here. So what we done is we made a very small app script based off, again, someone else's GitHub project. It was good. It was running really well. And what it done was took those workspace updates off of the blog and just dropped them right into our Google Chat space so we could discuss these updates just as they came in. It was really, really powerful. And we're still using it to this day. Now, what happened then is Lewis joined us, again, sitting virtually alongside me, and we said, hey, we work with Google organizations worldwide that would totally love to have this within their organization, because when we talk to organizations, they want to know what updates are coming out that suit them, right? So we say, okay, let's make this public. How are we going to do it? We're going to try make this a bit more scalable, a bit more usable. So we migrated off of AppScript onto the Google Cloud platform, and Lewis was the main brains behind that.
I guess it was really just sort of an internal initiative, and then it sort of evolved into something that we thought could bring value to other people. And so we got together and using the tools that Workspace and GCP provide, we were able to bring it to life and share it with the world.
Before we move on, where can folks find Updately? Is it freely available? Is there a fee? Tell us a little bit of background. I think is a great tool, by the way. Where can folks find more?
Updately is on the Google Workspace Marketplace. So if you're in Google Chat, you just go into the plus icon. It might have changed by the time you watch it now, but you add a bot, you type in Updately, and you'll be able to locally install it onto your space directly within the Google Workspace platform. There's no fees. It's completely free. All we want to do as Cobry is help other organizations get the most out of the Google Cloud technology. So we made it free and available to everyone worldwide. We actually have a lot of schools using it. We have a lot of nonprofits using it. We have a lot of organizations worldwide using it, and it's only been out for a couple of months. So we're really, really happy to see the adoption of the application basically without any marketing. So it's very clear for us that people are finding value out of it.
While we're on the topic of chat apps, Cobry seems to be innovating a lot around them by creating custom chat apps for your customers. What's behind the momentum? Why have you selected to build on chat? And what are the problems that you're trying to solve by building on chat that helps your customers out?
We come across 3 main problems when it comes to organizations using applications or systems, whatever that may be. One of them is application blowout, and that's kind of maybe a Cobry term. And what we mean by that is organizations say, oh, we need to solve this problem, we need to solve this problem, we need to solve this problem. And then you have 3 separate applications solving 3 separate problems. That's great because those problems are solved, but what ends up happening is when you have too many applications, things get really confusing. Notifications everywhere, You have to access these applications across multiple different websites, multiple different SaaS platforms. It gets confusing for end users. You introduce friction into your organization, and that friction is a lead problem of just employees being engaged with. The way chat apps fix that problem is by bringing those notifications down into a centralized location where the user is. And that's really important, where the user is. If you're an organization on Google Workspace, you will be using Gmail, you will be using Google Chat. So when you have a notification center that sits within Google Chat, what that allows you to do is that allows you to have a centralized notification store so your employees don't get bogged down by going to tens of different platforms to stay updated on the work that they're doing, which is really, really powerful. The second kind of pain that we usually see in organizations that love using chat apps is information access. So we're talking about FAQs, documentation. How do I do this? And actually, who kind of pioneered this is Discord. When gamers in the Discord channels usually created bots within there, because a lot of people ask the same questions. Hey, how do I do this within the game? How do I do that within the game? How do I engage with this community? And a lot of people made bots to answer those simple questions. And what we find is that kind of methodology is trickling over through into Google Chat, and people are creating chatbots that help people or bring information to the people, whether that is an FAQ, documentation, or things like that. And kind of the third use case or the third problem that chat apps solve is supplementing data into systems. So again, this kind of ties into the application blowout and bringing the application to where the user is, but not from a notification perspective, but from a data entry perspective. So a lot of organizations see an application as a back end and a front end. Usually that front end is a website that someone accesses or a locally installed app. But what we can do is we can actually create kind of like a second front end to an application, that being through Google Chat. So maybe the most common patterns of data entry within an application, you can actually do that through a Google Chat app. And again, that just increases the plane in which a user can access these applications. And again, it brings those applications to the user, especially with the most common use cases. So those are the three kind of most important ones. It's the notification overload, the information access, and number three is that data entry piece as well. Usually we feel like we can bucket chat apps into one of those three categories.
I was wondering, Victor, what you've just described is actually something that any Google Workspace customer would want. Is this something that customers know of? So do you have like loads of customers lining up, all waiting for you to create a Google custom chat app, or how does this usually work?
This is very much an education piece. So we have account managers with our customers and our client base that directly go to those accounts and those organizations with that sort of chat, pardon the pun, and they say, hey, Cobry can build this for you. And very often our conversion rate is very high in saying, actually, let's talk a little bit more about chat apps. How can we bring our users closer to the work that they're doing? And that starts a conversation, and that maybe starts a development journey. But the kind of second educational piece is the kind of marketing piece. A lot of organizations buy Google Workspace and still don't use all of its features, and never mind custom developed chat apps. So it's on us as partners to make sure that our organizations around the world using Google Workspace, A, get the most out of the tools they're already buying, and B, know ways that they can extend on those tools through custom applications such as chat using AppScript or other means. So it's very much an educational piece. For our current customers, we go to them directly, and they love us, we love them, and they're usually very receptive to our conversation around this. But secondly, there's millions of organizations that we don't have direct access to, that we just have to educate through other means.
Hey, so I've noticed on your website, you've got a great post called How to Over-Engineer a Chatbot on GCP. In the post, you cover chat apps, how they evolve through the development process, how they grow, how you can scale them to the right fit. Can either one of you jump in, perhaps Lewis? Tell us about your approach on building chat apps and how you see them evolve, kind of the support behind that article.
For the particular chat app that this blog talks about, that sort of started as an internal initiative where people had this idea for a chat app, but they didn't really know exactly how to go about it. So it took some sort of research into figuring out exactly where are we going to start with this thing. Obviously, you've been talking about low code and pro code solutions with AppSheet and AppScript. So there's a bit of play to decide where you're going to start with this idea. And so obviously with Cobry, we've got a really talented development team. So we said, okay, let's do it in AppScript. So we had this sort of internal chat app built in AppScript that was just sort of used internally with Cobry. And after a while, we sort of realized, this thing is actually pretty useful. We're using it all the time, and we're getting really, really interesting discussions coming up on these chat threads, and we said, maybe other people could start to use this, but there's no way that we could keep it in AppScript. AppScript is very much a sort of bespoke type thing, and when you start to get too many people trying to use this thing, um, it's just sort of not scalable enough. So we took that idea, lifted it up to GCP, and we built it out of Cloud Functions essentially and Firestore and shipped it out into the world. It was a pretty minimal implementation, really. That sort of evolution from AppScript to GCP can be quite neat and tidy due to the nice APIs that you get with Workspace line up very well with the code libraries that you get for programming languages like Node.js and things like that. So this sort of evolution from an idea to, well, is it going to be AppScript? It's going to be AppSheet. Maybe we go straight to GCP. We landed on AppScript, and then the evolution, as we realized that, okay, we're going to have a lot of people using this thing, we were able to evolve that into Cloud Functions on GCP.
So I have a question for you, Lewis, on that. You mentioned at a certain point, AppScript may not hold its weight. Do you have a good sense on when you would iterate with AppScript? Like this project, we need to see so many users actually feeling that this is a good thing. We can kind of prove that concept out before we invest doing it fully in GCP? Or is your inkling now to say maybe we start more projects just on the GCP side because we think we've got the concept proved out and we just want to do it one time?
It's kind of a case of intuition, really. You can tell when you come up with an idea, you can kind of tell what its purpose in life is going to be, whether it's going to be applicable to a lot of people or not. So, for instance, if it's just a sort of internal app and you're only going to use it in your company and your company's not that big, then you'll get away with AppScript just fine. But if you start to realize that this app has potential and you think that other people might be able to use it and you think that you're going to have to scale it, then it's a good idea to put it in GCP. But definitely AppScript has its place. There are a lot of apps that will happily live in AppScript for their whole life and they'll get by just fine. But there are certain cases where an app might have potential to grow or might have a potential to be used by a lot of people, and it's just having the intuition to figure out early on whether you think that'll be the case or not. But again, as I said, it's not even too difficult to move from AppScript to GCP because a lot of the sort of code that you write lines up really nicely on both environments.
Now that makes sense. And I think obviously since you guys have been doing it for a while, you have that expertise and you've got to, litmus test it where, okay, yeah, this feels right. If somebody wants to try to build their own chat apps, I mean, obviously they can call you guys and bring you in and have you guys help them. But if they want to start their own journey, is there any best tips, guidance, places you tell them to look, best practices you learned the hard way, anything you could tell them to help them kind of uplift and do this on their own?
Once you've sort of had this idea, I definitely recommend sort of peer reviewing it with someone saying, listen, I had this idea, what do you think? Brainstorming it a little bit, bringing it up a little bit from a simple idea into a sort of viable decision. And then it's a case of looking at your team, looking at your skills to determine where this idea is going to start. AppSheet has a brilliant chat app functionality. It's just coming. So it might be a good idea to start there with this idea where you don't need to write any code at all. It's completely no code. If that's the sort of skill set that your team has, then that's a great place to start. But if you've got some coding experience and you've got some teammates that know how to use AppScript and read documentation, stuff like that, then you might end up with a much nicer solution in AppScript. So it's really just sort of taking a step back before you dive in and just determine, okay, who's going to work on this app, what's it going to do, and who's going to use it, and then you'll be able to get a really nice picture of what the solution is going to look like and how it's going to happen.
I think succinctly, you could just put it into three things. So take inventory of your skill. Lewis mentioned that. So have I got developers? Have I got people eager to take this into production? Take inventory of your skill and kind of align that with how far you think you can take this application. The second point is take inventory of the quotas and limitations of each system that you're trying to use. So if I'm trying to build a routing app, maybe I've got delivery drivers and they need to find the most optimal route to get between our warehouses. Is it going to be 10 drivers using it 10 times a day, or is it going to be hundreds of drivers using it hundreds of times a day? Well, then you're going to have to want to look up the Google Maps API to see how many times you can ping a route search. If it's 10,000 times, you're going to go way over your quota if you're doing it for hundreds of drivers, right? So then you might want to say, actually, we don't want to be using AppScript for that. And thirdly, take inventory of how far you think this app is going to go. So am I going to be using this internally only? Or would you actually kind of sit down and think, well, actually, if I'm making a routing system for my drivers, who's to say that I can't sell this to my competitors' drivers or the world, right? And that's when you've got to think big and think scalability in mind. But don't let that kind of dissuade you from failing fast. Updately was born on a very, very simple, very crude, if I can say, Google App Script, and it worked really well. And we'd be totally happy taking that all the way to the end of its life. But it's only when we decided to say, hey, actually, this needs to go global, we made the decision to migrate. And as Lewis said, we kind of know how to migrate, and we can do it very well. Google makes it quite easy for us. We have defined migration paths from AppScript to GCP, so we can make that happen. Of course, it is a cost. Of course, it does take time. But if that kind of pain of change is lesser than the pain of same, then you just got to bite the bullet and do it. And we can do it really well.
You've mentioned, first of all, Workspace as a platform, and I love that. You've also alluded to AppSheet's specific point in that platform. And Lewis, you mentioned that there's a new chat app feature in there, which is super neat, right? Actually, it's not released yet, but it's been previewed and you can check it out, where you can build chat apps using AppSheet projects, which is super neat. So it kind of democratizes the building of chat apps for anybody. I'd love to know, from where you guys sit as experts on building on the platform, where does AppSheet fit in? How do you position it with customers? What's the discussions you're having around it? When do you use it? And frankly, when do you say we wouldn't consider it? I'd love to get that expert opinion.
The main thing that we see when it comes to proposing AppSheet to our customers and in our marketing and in our sales is that AppSheet's a wonderful platform for, if that number one point, having the skills, the programming skills, organizations that don't have those programming skills. Anyone, and literally anyone that can, point a mouse and type on their keyboard can create an app using AppSheet. And the wonderful thing about that is, once you're on an AppSheet license, you can make as many apps as you'd like. The way we like to position it is it's a wonderful platform for putting a front end onto a back end. And what I mean by that is, organizations usually have systems and processes that are really spreadsheet heavy, and there's a lot of manual typing and very little validation. It's kind of like it's technically an application. If you've got all your processes running in a spreadsheet, you're just using a spreadsheet as a front end to that application. But what AppSheet does really, really well is help add a nice front end to an application running on spreadsheets. When it comes to chat apps, again, that feature is not out yet. But the way we'd see it is in chat apps is it'd be a very nice way to get you started with Google Chat apps, to fail fast, to iterate fast. And by the time you've created your proof of concept and you've kind of validated your idea, that's when you've got to take the path from, okay, we're going to invest a little bit more into this. We're going to upskill our team and we're going to maybe move it over to AppScript, because it's slightly more customizable. It's slightly more extensible. But the migration path between AppSheet and AppScript, we have migration paths for both AppSheet to AppScript to GCP. But to make that first hop, it's kind of ironic. AppSheet does have support for built-in AppScript. So the way we position it to our customers and say, hey, you're using AppSheet really well, but your processes are starting to kind of hit the ceiling of what AppSheet can do. What we'd recommend is actually start fiddling around with the inbuilt AppScript editor. Try setting up a few functions that help to get you where you want to be. And then once we see the client, the customer, the organization find a little bit of comfort of running AppScript on their AppSheet platform, then we say, okay, you've seen the power of AppScript. Time to move everything over, or most of your things over, or maybe some of your things over. But at that point, you've made your first hop.
I think the one thing a lot of folks struggle from is they don't really understand which tool, and they kind of pick or choose or aren't sure what decision to make. And so you're right. Sometimes it's easy to make the wrong one and think that you're trapped in it. So no, I love that idea of taking that approach and helping people understand it. I love what you said, by the way, that customers become comfortable in realizing that this app script thing is not a big, hard thing to learn. They kind of ease into it. So that's a great insight. Lewis, is there anything to add on? I know you're quote unquote you're a full stack developer. If someone asks you to work with AppSheet, what are your impressions about using a no-code tool to build solutions?
Yeah, AppSheet is a brilliant tool. But I would say the further you get from the metal, so to speak, the fewer options you have. So AppSheet is great for, as Victor said, spreadsheet-based applications and maybe sort of create, read, update, and delete sort of operations and things like that. And there are a lot of amazing use cases for it. But as I said, it is more limited as it's more sort of abstract from the actual code itself. It just takes a bit of discretion when we do say, okay, could we do this in AppSheet? It's like, yeah, we could do it in AppSheet, but the road is not as long, so to speak, as app scripts. So you can only take it so far. But as Victor said, it's possible to move from AppSheet to AppScript. So there is no sort of pigeonholing when you do decide to choose AppSheet. You're not getting stuck in an AppSheet. Like it's very flexible after all.
And in terms of an application's lifecycle, sometimes the application is totally fine living on AppSheet. You don't have to move over. That might be overkill. Your business, your organization might be entirely happy running a process or a system entirely on the AppSheet platform. And it does work for hundreds and thousands of organizations around the world. So we're not saying that it's only the start of your journey. It could totally be the end as well. And you could be entirely happy and better for it.
Hey, let me ask you a question. You guys obviously have tons of expertise. You've actually thought about these things. If folks wanted to connect with you, whether they're in Glasgow, Scotland, or not, anywhere around the world, what's the best way to actually engage you guys?
The best way to get in touch is through our website, going to cobry.co.uk/start your journey. That'll take you directly into a meeting link. And if you've got a development problem, an app script problem, you want a chat app made for you, that will go directly into our dev team's calendar. So you can be speaking face to face to meet with me very, very quick through our website. If you don't want to go through that, we're also very, very active on LinkedIn, and we're all open to connecting. So you can either connect with me, myself, Victor, or Lewis, who's kind of sitting virtually beside me. Those are the two best channels to get in touch with us.
I also noticed that you're hiring. Do you want to plug or shout out for what you're looking for and how you expect to see the company grow?
We always have an always hiring model. And what that means, we are always looking for talented people, despite what it says on our job board. If you're a developer, if you're a marketer, if you're a salesperson, and you like our vibe, you like what we do, you like the way we talk, totally get in touch with us. It's an always hiring model. And what that means is if we think you're a good fit, despite there not being a job ad out there, we're totally open to having that conversation and giving you a space or making you a space at Cobry. Our growth plans are high. They're very ambitious. So if you do think that you're going to be a good fit, just based off of this conversation or what you see online, please do get in touch no matter what you do. We love to hear from great people, no matter what your position is.
On your website, we've noticed this Cobry towel. Tell us what's it about and how can you get one?
Oh, brilliant. You found the Easter egg. So if you made it this far into the video, get on our website, scroll right down to the bottom of our footer, and it says, do you want a towel? You can click on that. There is a backstory behind it, and the backstory is a long story, but long story short, we were ordering merch a while back, and someone at some point clicked the towel button and got intrigued and ordered a whole bunch of towels for everyone at Cobry. We have too many towels, and actually our clients love them. They think they're brilliant. So if you found the Easter egg, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, go to our website, scroll all the way down to the footer, click on request the towel, and you've just got to give us a good joke. If we think that your joke is good enough, there may be a chance that there may be a Cobry towel coming your way.
Charles, you're mute.
Charles can't hear you.
So let's see if I can get a joke here. Wait a second. Do I qualify for a Cobry towel if I want to go to the best beaches in Scotland?
Was that the joke, Charles?
You don't qualify.
Wow.